Okay, thank you, Bruce and Sanjay. Very good presentation.
Well, there's questions coming out. I have to say I was at the last show prior to COVID at the Roundhouse, and I was impressed by the event. So well done. I hope those return quickly because they're well needed and probably very popular right now.
Yes, I'm afraid this year we have once again canceled the Electrofest that we used to do, largely because of COVID uncertainty still. So it's a shame, yeah, because more and more people are wanting to get the information.
So there is a question. There's a limit to the EV rebates. Is there a limit to EV rebates? I assume that means either time. So right now, we believe there's adequate funding to kind of withstand the EV rebates, current rebates through the end of the year, even if we are all very aggressive out there and put in as many charges as possible. Funding is pretty secure. Essentially, when we recommend any strata building considering a proposal or a project to get pre-approval of the rebates. So once a strata building gets pre-approval for say $108,000, when you do talk to the ownership, you can basically say we've already been pre-approved. And with the pre-approval, those funds are set aside and they're allocated. You have 4 months to do the project. If the project does go beyond 4 months because you need an AGM or an SGM or something prevents that, and I'd have to admit most of the projects we do go over 4 months. We ask for an extension and we've got it every time as main thing they want to know is, are you serious about doing the project? That's the key element. If you've lost interest, they want to reallocate the money to somebody else. That's awesome. I find I spend a lot of time
and I see yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say I've been driving a Chevy Bolt for two years, and I find my most enjoyable part of my day is when I stop at a public station to charge and just hear other people's stories and fellow EV owners and their challenges. And it's amazing the amount of people I come across that do live in strata buildings and are frustrated because they basically they're told no, you can't charge here and leave us alone kind of thing. So I think a lot of work's got to be done in that area. So it's good to see there's incentives and rebates to kind of help that happen. But at the same time, it takes council to kind of be the first movers in that regard. But yeah, I think
do see other people's hands are coming up successfully. So Harvey, you're up. Go ahead.
I'm here. Okay, so one of the questions I have, which I put in the chat, was I am part of a strata up at Whistler, and only about 10% of the parking spots that are owned by the owners are being used by permanent residents. The rest are usually used for short-term rentals, like a week at a time or a month at a time, or there might be a long-term rental for a year or 6 months. Is there any limitation to would our strata be available to receive the grants provided, up to $108,000?
Yeah, 108,000. Yeah, you'd qualify for the rebate. Usage, whether it's a rental building or a permanent residence, it does qualify for the rebates.
Okay, that's great. The main problem we have in our building, which is was built in 1996, finished in 97. PBX out of Squamish did a review of our electrical system, and they had some issues with the electrical vault, and they recommended a very, very, very high amount to kind of replace and upgrade that electrical vault. They're worried that the EV charging infrastructure, as well as a lot of owners of units, wanted to add in for the summertime use air conditioners. And with the extra load of air conditioners and EV charging, they felt that the charging capability of the existing infrastructure would not be possible, period. And that there has been some damage also to the due to just weather and stuff inside the vault, leaking of water, and they really see a need to really overhaul that system. And of course, you know, the cost of that are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's a major, you know, burden on the owners having to put out levies, special levies. And we're just going through a 3-year process of resurfacing all the decks of the 185 or 190 units in that structure. So they don't want to do anything regarding EVs until, you know, this, you know, the electrical power system would be overhauled so it would be satisfactorily fixed to accommodate all this extra power. I did send Sanjay a copy of the PBX report, so he has seen it. I'm not sure, Sanjay, if you've actually read it thoroughly, and I'm glad that you sent out a pardon my voice, I'm a bit hoarse right now. Anyway, Sanjay did send out a request for a proposal to be made to and a site visit to see if that would be possible, to at least to have you know, his expertise to see if it is possible the way it is existing now, or if PBX is 100% right in having to upgrade the facility, which again is going to cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, just to that, so we've done capacity studies on, you know, over 500 buildings in the Lower Mainland, and we rarely come across a building that doesn't have adequate capacity. But sometimes it's on the high voltage side, sometimes it needs to, you know, some extra work. But as far as bringing in more power from the, you know, from the grid, we don't see a lot of that. And we generally see the older buildings have more capacity on the general service than newer buildings. But, you know, that's a generalized statement. I don't want to second guess that report at this point, but we specialize in, you know, squeezing out all the energy we can out of the existing building.
Yeah.
And using circuit sharing and load management and energy management. We found that capacity really doesn't end up being the problem in most of the buildings. A comment on air conditioning. Most of the time, the air conditioning units are based on suite panel capacity rather than the general service. And EV charging is going off of the you know, off the house service. So again, we could certainly look at it. We do the assessment at no charge and kind of give you a layout of what it looks like and some of the pitfalls you might be facing. So if you'd like a, you know, a second opinion, we could certainly do that. Make sure you know, you're getting the best information possible.
Okay, and the other thing is, I think your presentation is fantastic. I think it's made, like you say, make it easy to understand in layman's terms, and explaining the technicalities. It's very, very made simple, and because most people that are you know, looking at it may not even have an EV, but they realize that EVs are coming, and I think the way you've explained it is done exceptionally well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 hands up from Kelly and Simon. We'll go to Kelly first, and then I'll go to Riley, who has a question in the chat, and I'll ask that. So Kelly, you go ahead.
So it looks like you guys are pushing the Unico power system as like the primary thing that you're selling. And so what chargers work with that system?
Well, you do need to utilize an energy, like an EMS compatible charger. Right now there's 2 available in Canada, so a relatively small, you know, group. But essentially what we see, I mean, we install flow chargers and hypercharge as well. Essentially when a building puts in a charging solution, generally they stay with that solution. So most buildings, you know, you don't see a mix of, you know, all kinds of different chargers. Generally, most strata buildings only want one, you know, kind of system to manage, one type of billing system, one type of, you know, activation process. So in reality, we don't see a lot of mixed services. It's possible, but just not very cost effective to mix and match systems. You usually kind of stay with one brand. We're sold on the EMS system because of the advantages specifically in strata buildings. But even in mixed use stratas, a lot of buildings right now we're doing in like UBC, they have mixed, commercial and residential or retail. So we recommend the EMS-based system for the residential parkade, but a different solution like a flow or a hypercharge in the either in the retail or public charging space. Just because everybody has the apps on their phone, they're just better suited for kind of charging on the go. Unico Power's EMS system is good for a gated community, whether it be fleet or staff or residential parking. It's essentially that's where its strengths are, because again, vehicles are going to park over 4 hours on a daily basis, so you can throttle and manage energy a lot more efficiently than other applications.
And who certifies the system?
You mean by approval?
Yeah. So anything that overloads the electrical panel, which like a EV EMS does, has to be has to be certified by an electrical engineer.
Yeah, I mean, everything's done under permit, and the EMS is managed under the the electrical code. They're constantly upgrading, what's permitted and not permitted by EMS in the electrical code. So it's done through permitting process. The energy management system has an annual operating permit that's pulled, so that there's actually somebody on record that manages the EMS system on behalf of the building or strata that's involved. So it's fairly formalized. The one thing you mentioned that the EMS system allows the panel to be overloaded, which that's not actually the case. It prevents the panels from being overloaded. So it's actually preventative, not allowing it to occur.
Well, the amount of chargers on the panel exceeds the rating of the panel. I know the EVMS stops it from being overloaded, but that's the point of it needing like a certification by an electrical engineer to say that it's actually safe.
Yeah, and the system it's CSA, UL approved, and it's a safety device. The fail-safe on the EMS system, basically, if the EMS loses control of the system, there's a fail-safe where even if technically all the chargers are on and all control is lost, it fail-safes to a safe mode to not cause any overloading or any kind of danger to any of the panels or electrical systems or the cars themselves.
The next question is on in the chat by Riley. And Riley, if you want to comment on this, you can come in after, but I'll just read your question in the chat here. How long do you think it will be for load management systems, the EMS systems you're talking about, to improve to make 10+ circuit sharing viable?
They're actually currently, they have the capability to do virtually unlimited circuit sharing. So you can do, 10 or 20 circuit sharing if you want. Why we recommend a maximum of 4-to-1 circuit sharing is that one of the big questions is what is level 2 charging? Like, we all know what level 1 charging is the 15 or 20 amp household circuit. So the maximum you're going to get off of a level 1 charger is 16 amps. So there's no more you can put off of that circuitry, and you'll blow the breaker. So when you go to level 2, the question is, what is level 2? It's obviously higher than level 1 and it's lower than level 3, but what does it actually mean? What is it going to deliver for energy? Well, if you go above, say a 6 or 7-to-1 circuit sharing, you're down into the level 1 charging category, and you're not going to get very much range of charging. So most of the jurisdictions in the Lower Mainland and across Canada are setting some type of minimum charging rate. And like in the Lower Mainland, it's basically to be a level 2 system, it has to be capable of delivering 12 kilowatts over 8 hours to each vehicle. So by definition, that's 1.5 kilowatts. So our systems, we don't recommend on a 40 amp circuit you go any more than 4-to-1, which will be 1.66 kilowatts per vehicle, which is a little bit higher than the recommended lowest rate recommended, for what a level 2 charge is. So again, the system, if the power is available, you can charge it a full 6.6 kilowatts. But if there's demand surcharges, then you might get throttled down to 1.6, as low as 1.66. But in general, we don't see a lot of that actually happening on systems because there's usually more energy available. But that is worst case scenario. 100% of the vehicles are EVs. 100% of them are charging all at the same time. 100% of them need energy, so they're going to get at least 1.66 kilowatts each. But yes, so sorry that's a long answer, but technically the systems you could put 20 circuits on 140 amp breaker if you wanted to. Just they wouldn't get much energy each of them.
I'm muted, sorry. Riley, do you have anything else to say? I'll just give you a second to come in if you want any further clarification. That seemed pretty clear to me. Okay, so the next hand up is Don Chandler. So Don, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Don. And Bruce, nice to see you. A great presentation, very articulate. But I do have a few technical questions. If you remember back in the early days of EVs, back in around 2000, 1990s, a company named Blink came to the fore and eventually went bankrupt. And that created a concern by everybody that for stranded assets. It's still an emerging market. There's lots of products out there, lots of EVSEs, lots of management systems. And there's a big concern, and this is driven in the incentive programs as well, that you can replace one system with another fairly easily. Yeah, I see you're using the Unico system, which is a fine system, and I like their long-range communications, but at the same time, that's not what other systems can use. So if to replace it would require installing other communications networks, which have their own problems, but are used by most other systems. And I was just wondering how you are looking towards being not, or let's say be sustainable in the sense that if people don't like your system, they could switch to another system fairly easily. We've done that with a few systems, and it seems to go fairly smoothly if they're fully compliant to a CPP. And I guess the other question I have is, how are you dealing with the patent you're violating on monitoring the building service entrance and controlling charging that way?
Sorry.
Did you hear the full question?
I didn't hear his question. So.
Oh, okay. So Don, why don't you start from the beginning?
Yeah, okay. I'll two questions really come to the fore. Back in the early days of EVs, a company named Blink came to was quite popular, eventually went bankrupt, and that created a concern amongst all consumers about stranded assets. It's an emerging market for all of us, and a lot of the standards like OCPP are helping to alleviate that, but interchanging charge stations on different management systems or interchanging management systems is not totally straightforward. We've tested a few, broken just about everything we've tried except one. And I'm just wondering how you deal with your system, which uses the long-range communications, which wouldn't transfer to other systems as well. And you're starting on an older version of OCPP, just how that would interact with a switch to or compatibility with other systems and other charge stations. And I'll have another question, how you're dealing with the patent on controlling load management through monitoring the main service, which is a patent by another Viva member. You take those two, but that'd be a good start.
Sounds good. Well, first of all, I think every system available has kind of its strengths and weaknesses. I think the key element is to just understand what they are and just make the best decision. So out of trial and error, we determine what we believe are the kind of the best, best made, best supported, best quality type of systems. But they all do have their strengths and weaknesses. And you have some that are, based on, panel control, like a Evolute by EV Duty to a cell-based smart system like ChargePoint or Flow to something like an EMS system by Unico Power. So again, it's just kind of understanding how it applies to a particular case and what its strengths are. Essentially, I'll put this out here as an opinion, is that I think the systems that go into a building today will probably stay there for the life of the building because they'll always provide energy to charge cars. and I don't know what a compelling reason to change. You know, the wall socket in our houses hasn't changed in 100 years, and there's no real reason to do it. But certainly the things we plug into it have changed. So not sure why somebody would want to change that. So really, build quality becomes really. And when you think about EV ready, all of the, you know, the wires, the conduit, the cabling, the circuits, the breakers, those are pretty much, you know, non-moving parts. They should last for theoretically almost ever. So then you're talking about the actual charge stations, which will provide energy. And then there's the demand or the controller unit. And then there's communication. So again, regardless of what kind of communication you use, you know, we'll go out of business and not be around anymore. It'll be something else. We'll communicate with our minds. Who knows? Maybe our chargers will one day. But I'm sure that the technology will advance along with the tech, you know, what's available out there. So the EMS system, again, not every system's perfect, but one of its design characteristics are the chargers themselves that are EMS compatible. Those are OCCP, the chargers are, but the EMS, the brain of the unit, is not OCCP. It's a proprietary control system. So if somebody said, well, we don't want to use the EMS anymore, a third party could come in and install gateway controllers and control the chargers that are in the parking garage. But again, I'm not sure why somebody would want to do that other than, you know, a real game changer came along, but you never know. But kind of that's where the, I guess the risk comes in putting any system is, will they be around forever? And that's, you know, a lot of reason people choose large companies like Flow, which is an Ad Energy, you know, kind of spinoff, very stable billion-dollar company, very solid. But again, you never know if somebody decides to exit the EV charging space. There's not much you can do. So, and then we got new contenders coming on like LG Electronics. They want to get into the EV charging space. You know, we're talking to them right now about bringing a product to Canada. So there's a lot of good opportunities out there. But again, a lot of people need chargers now, so we got to kind of deal with what's available in Canada.
And the patent that looking at monitoring your service entrance through the meter and controlling charging, how are you dealing with that patent?
Not sure which patent you're referring to.
It's one that Variable Grid uses by Mike Schuler, a Viva member, that basically patent the monitoring of a distribution of power at any level, whether it be a panel or a distribution center or switchboard or service entrance, and then controlling the charge through a PWM circuit, which J1772 does. It's a pretty good patent in that sense, conceptually. Hasn't been challenged yet, but when it does, that could put companies like yours having to do lease agreements or something, which would increase costs. I'm just wondering how you're dealing with that, because it's a great system to be able to monitor the service entrance and can limit the power, but from a business sense and a strata concern, how do you deal with that?
Are you somehow affiliated with the company that has the patent?
No, I'm not. I'm quite knowledgeable about their product, however.
Yeah, I was going to say that's. I'm not aware of any patent issues with Unico Power System. If there are, we're not aware of them, and I'm not sure what patents they have. We're, you know, we're believers in their system, but and you know, we have the necessary assurances that we're putting in a system that's reliable and well serviced and maintained. But I couldn't answer that. I could certainly look into it, but I don't have any knowledge on that.
Yeah, and Unico is a good solid system for sure. I've seen a number of installs in various buildings I've been touring. So in the long range communications definitely helps cut costs. I guess the other question, just addressing on the question that Riley had, is how can you deal with multiple sharing, like beyond 6 share, which really brings the cost down in a number of larger buildings in the inner core area. You know, 10 share was quite common in Vancouver, could do, and you would cut the costs of wiring the buildings quite a bit. I've done a lot of the research on the performance calculations for that. And so I was just wondering why you're sort of standing by 4 share when you can really reduce your costs by sharing more for people that don't drive a lot.
Well, I think for future proofing, we have to assume battery and range is going to get longer. I mean, we're talking about the F-150 coming out in electric and these big trucks and cyber trucks and whatnot. And pretty well all the manufacturers are going away from hybrids. So we're going to see a lot more range. And but really the compelling reason that we recommend not going below 1.66 or 1.5 is that that's BC Hydro's criteria to obtain the rebates. If you don't maintain a level 2 charging standard, you don't get any rebates. So that's that's an $80,000 question. I don't think you're going to save $80,000 in electrical costs. I mean, the difference between a number 8 wire and a number 12 wire is not that significant. You still got to run kind of the conduit, and a lot of the main things costs are the same. And then you have a building that's kind of underwired, and people are going to have less than thrilling expectations of what they're going to get for a charge. It's kind of like plugging into a public park charging station that's low level 2 and split in half, and you plug in for 2 hours and you go shopping or for dinner and you come out and you got 7 kilometers of range and you've actually paid for it. It's a less than thrilling experience. So we would just recommend having a minimum standard. But I mean, if a building does want to do it that way, and there's a compelling reason, we'll design it anyway a strata or building owner wants it done, just as long as they understand they're not going to get the rebates because of the design of the system.
Actually, we've applied to BC Hydro for a number of rebates, and if you look in their guide for the incentive program, there they give a performance standard with examples of multiple sharing that they do. It's the only city bylaws that are restricting you to the 12 kilowatt hours over 8 hours, and not the reality of in retrofits where that doesn't apply, and you can. And we see a lot of people looking at the higher sharing.
Okay, well, we're certainly open to that. That's not been our experience, but good to know.
Anyway, thanks. Otherwise, a great presentation.